I recognize this. Oh.
It's Spooktober.
Yeah. Did you played that before, right? I'm not crazy.
Maybe, I don't know.
Because I recognize it.
Yeah, I mean it's a meme song. You know, it's the guy with a pumpkin on his face in like a black turtleneck. You know.
Yes.
Dancing. So yeah, no, it's Spooktober, the spookiest time of the year. Ooh, everything's so scary.
Yeah, you could say it's the most spookiest time of the year.
Good one.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to Select and Reflect, the movie review podcast where we look at films that have come out in the near and distant past. We give them a couple of watches and evaluate them beyond first impressions. I'm your host Michael and I'm joined as always by my co-host Luke. And this week we are celebrating the official beginning of Spooktober, which is of course when we look at horror films because it is the lead up to Halloween. And usually we try to look at significant horror films and also horror films that have a special anniversary. And today we are celebrating the 50 year anniversary of the release of The Exorcist Part 1, The Beginning. No, not any of that other stuff. Luke, why don't you tell us a thing or two about The Exorcist?
Sure thing, Michael. You said we do horror movies because they're significant or there's an anniversary. Of course, this is both.
What?
Yeah, this is one of the most famous horror movies of all time. And also it's his 50-year anniversary. The Exorcist came out in 1973. It is a supernatural horror film directed by William Friedkin from a screenplay by William Peter Blatty, based on his 1971 novel of the same name.
Yes.
So yeah, I think you could tell this was a novel.
Yeah, it's got lots of like characters. You could imagine like each chapter would be like, it starts off with like a new different person in their own location.
Yeah. The movie stars Ellen Burstyn, Max von Sydow, Lee J. Cobb, Kitty Wynn, Jack McGowan, Jason Miller, and Linda Blair.
Did you say Jason Momoa?
No, Jason Miller.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. Jason Momoa is not the priest
No.
in this movie. We forgot to mention this, but I mean, it is forgettable anyway. There is a new Exorcist movie coming out, which is also why we are doing this movie, which you may have got on your list, Michael, of when we're doing the movies. It's called Exorcist the Believer, and it is already out actually in cinemas by the time this comes out. But that movie, we were going to guess the Rotten Tomatoes for it, but it's already been released. The Rotten Tomatoes
it's already done fantastic
ratings, and it's on like 24%.
Yeah. To be fair, like the funny thing about The Exorcist is that I guess this is true of every horror movie. There have been like a billion kind of cash grab things to the point I don't even think like anyone's paying attention to it. Personally, when I was looking for The Exorcist on one of the very many legal sites that I watch films on, I found so many like The Exorcist, The Untold Story, and like you could tell it was like made in like 2003 for like a penny with like probably porn actors.
Okay, well
I was like, yeah.
So you're not going to see The Exorcist Believer or whatever it's called?
No, I don't think so.
Wow. Anyway, this movie was released, by the way, on December the 26th, 1973, which is a very odd time for it to be released. Just one day after Christmas, but there we are.
Well, back in those days, they hadn't invented horror movies, so they weren't quite sure how to handle it.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Well, this is one of the very early classic horror movies, of course. The budget, well, I say very early. When you think of like horror movies, I guess the most iconic ones are like The Shining and Halloween, Freddy Krueger.
Freddy got fingered.
Freddy Krueger got fingered. Friday the 13th, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Thing, all came after this, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Night of the Living Dead didn't.
That's a good point. Anyway, Michael, can you tell me what the budget was for The Exorcist?
I mean, maybe the special effects, possibly. I don't know, like fucking shit. And also, am I adjusting for inflation? Maybe. It cost $2 million.
Oh, you went a lot less than half.
Oh, really? Crazy.
Because it's $12 million.
I wonder if that is adjusted for inflation.
No, it's not adjusted for inflation. You were just horribly wrong. Adjusted for inflation, I actually saw this on the Wikipedia. It would be about $60 million. So yeah.
See, well, I feel like the thing I heard about it not having any, like the actors not being that famous at the time, is true.
Yeah, but did you also hear about the fact that the production was very long? Did you hear about that?
Oh,
No.
I think I heard there were studio disputes.
No, there wasn't any studio disputes.
Oh, really?
No.
So, okay, the one thing that I thought I had heard wasn't even...
No, it just
whatever.
took very long because there were constant issues, and some believe the production was cursed, which we'll get into.
That's impossible.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And of course, $12 million is quite sizable for 1973. But yeah, you got that very wrong. Yes. So, Michael, can you tell me what the box office was for The Exorcist? And I guarantee you're going to get this one wrong as well.
Good. £1,000. No. Fucking. I don't know. I feel like maybe it's lower than you would think. Oh shit. No, I don't know. Maybe it's higher. God damn it! It made 50 million. 50 million.
You're not just going to get this wrong, by the way. You're going to go less than half. That's my prediction. Well,
oh really? Okay. I said 50 million.
Is that your final guess?
Well, it's definitely going to be less than half. But yeah, you know what? Yeah, 50 million.
So the box office total was 441 million.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, you're not just embarrassed by your guess?
No, because you kind of you ruined it by saying already that I was going to get less than half. So it's like,
What do you mean? I ruined it. I gave you another chance.
Like, oh, Michael, I believe in you, and I think you're going to get this right. I would have been like, oh man, I can't believe I got it wrong. But instead, because you were like, oh, don't worry, Michael. Like in my head, you're like, you're already going to get this wrong. So
it's actually more embarrassing that I thought you would get it so wrong, and of course I was correct. And despite that, you still guessed that low even after I warned you. So it's actually extra embarrassing. You don't have any clue about the history of this movie? You know, I guess you don't. Yeah, right. So Michael, tell me, did you like The Exorcist?
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, there are some people, no less a film authority than Mark Commode, I don't know if you know this, this is one thing I know about The Exorcist, considers this his favourite movie of all time. Not even horror movie, just like favourite movie ever. Which I must admit, you know, in my own having watched it, you know, that opinion is somewhat elusive to me. But I think this film is good. I think it's kind of effective with the tension. I think there are like things that this film does that are different from kind of what's more typical of a horror movie nowadays, and that makes it like interesting. Mm-hmm. I think by contemporary standards, this film is not like terrifying, but then I don't know. At the same time, if you're an adult, how scared can you really be about a horror film?
In the 70s, it was terrifying.
I know, crazy. But yeah, so like obviously, I mean, this film is really well liked. I'm not going to be like, oh, I didn't like it. I would say, yeah, I did like it. But you know, as a horror film, it wasn't that scary.
Well,
but
it's
I
not
think
just
it did
about
have,
that.
Yeah,
like...
you're right. Yeah, I think probably the main thing I liked about it was that it kind of had a lot more of a character thing to it, you know, and that's probably, you know, as we go through, I'll probably mention the interesting things it has going on, but definitely that's something that separates it from a lot of crappy films nowadays. It's like, oh wow, these are like really well drawn characters, and you really kind of understand what they got going on. And I like that. That was nice to see in a horror film. It's like a horror film meets a character study.
The thing is, this movie is actually like a good movie, which is not what you can say for most horror movies.
Yeah.
I think it got an interesting premise, of course, this exorcism, which, of course, there are iconic scenes of the girl being possessed, but it's more than that, because it actually is just a good movie. I think there's a very good setup, and I think there's a lot of, like you said, interesting characters. The plot in general is good, and you can absolutely tell this came from a novel, because if this was somebody writing a screenplay, it would not have been anywhere near as good. So this had to be adapted from a novel to be this good. As is the case for a lot of really good movies, the reason why they're good is because there's a lot of attention paid to characters, and that's because you know, there is a novel first and foremost that kind of demands that the characters are set up in a certain way to give them depth, which is the case with this movie. And so yeah, that's the thing. It's a really good movie. It's not scary, but there are some cool moments that I really do like. And in general, despite it not being scary, there's hardly any. I think there's just one jump scare, which is when the mother goes into the attic, and the director makes some very good choices in terms of making this movie feel grounded and realistic, and you really get invested and immersed in this story, which is kind of weird for a horror movie. That's the thing. I was thinking while watching this, like, oh wow, I'm really enjoying this story, and this is a horror movie. This is weird. This shouldn't really be the case, but yeah, credit to this movie for doing that. It's a really solid movie. So, Michael, how many nitpicks do you have?
I've got one.
Okay, I also have one. You go first.
Yeah, so if Karras, that is his name, isn't it, is supposed to be such a great psychiatrist, why wouldn't he be aware that exorcism could work if you believe it works? So you know how like there's a whole thing about like the very serious psychiatrists in the conference are like, oh, you could try an exorcist because, you know, obviously medical science doesn't support the spiritual aspect of it, but psychologically it's true that if someone believes something would work, then it can actually work. And if Karras is supposed to be such a great psychiatrist himself, you know, it's a bit surprising he didn't think of that, did he? He was all like, oh no, you know, you shouldn't do that because it's not, you know, exorcism's not real or whatever. You know, he's supposed to be such a great psychiatrist, didn't think that one through, did he?
And my nitpick is this. So, of course, this movie came out in the back end of 73, basically, you know, seeped into 74. Journalists complained that coverage of the film was distracting the public from the Watergate scandal.
Oh.
And I think that's disgraceful that the public would be distracted by, you know, some cheap horror movie like this when there is, you know, serious politics going on that demands the you know, the public's attention.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Like, I'm a bit upset that this new Exorcist movie is completely overriding the focus we need to be taking on, you know, Let's Go Brandon's horrible scandals that he's got going on.
Yeah, his reign of terror. Yeah. Yeah, God. Yeah. Why he should be impeached, Joe Biden. I'm not sure what for, but it should happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's just go through the plot first, Michael. So the story follows the demonic possession of a girl and her mother's attempt to rescue her through an exorcism by two Catholic priests. Mark Kermode noted that by stylistically distancing itself from Gothic horror films of the 60s, the film presented a credible portrait of the modern urban world ripped apart by an obscene ancient evil. And that is the key. It's a modern world. It's of course the 70s. You know, it's set in the 70s. You know, and there's nothing weird about the world these characters are inhabiting, and that's what makes this movie so interesting. That it is like this ancient evil which is ripping this, you know, normal world apart, which is again crucial. And by the way, just so you know, you said this is Mark Kermode's favorite movie. You know, he made a documentary in 1995 about it, right?
Oh, really? I think I had heard that.
But you failed to bring it up.
Well, you know, there's things that could, you know, if I said everything and that I knew, then we'd be here all day.
Oh, it was just, you know, you were talking about. Did you know, Luke, that Mark Kermode thinks it's his favorite movie? Did you know? Yes. Well, did you know he made a documentary about it in '95? You go on Wikipedia, the Exorcist Wikipedia page. It's just Mark Kermode quotes or Mark Kermode thoughts over and over again.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That is quite funny then. Because I obviously, you know, I've seen a Mark Kermode thing in my time. I just remember him like casually mentioning every now and then, like, oh yeah, The Exorcist, my favorite movie, blah blah blah.
Yeah, but crucially, this movie is credible. Right, that's the thing. It is credible that this demon has possessed this girl, which sounds so stupid, and you know, it's such a ridiculous thing to imagine. And I did, after I watched the movie, I did sit and just think to myself, you know what, like that is such a stupid premise, but you're not thinking about that when you're getting into the movie. Like, it's interesting, and it's an interesting premise, but it's also stupid. But when you're watching it, you know, because this movie is so grounded, like, it's credible. I believe, you know, this could be happening in this film. And yeah, it's not that scary. It is 50 years old, of course, but yeah, you're invested in it. And I think, of course, the key, you know, is that, well, for me anyway, the reason why I was invested is because, and I imagine a lot of people as well who are watching, they're not like religious weirdos, unlike yourself.
Yeah.
Like, we would be, the audience, myself, we would be having similar thoughts to Chris, the mother in the movie. We would go from thinking, well, yeah, there's absolutely no way that, you know, there could be any supernatural problem with her, to like, what the hell's happening? Oh yeah, she is possessed. And yeah, that is what this movie does really well. Yeah.
I think the thing that I find interesting about this film is it's almost like, and again, it's interesting because this film is like good in a very strange way, because one of the things I like about it is almost the mundanity of it, in that like, it basically, you know, that idea of this ancient evil, which I think was the thing that said, like, ancient evil in like the modern world, and it is like that aspect of, and I think like it's almost like you compare it to a different horror film in that it's almost like they never really break that sense of, oh, isn't it weird that this is happening? Because like in, you know, most horror films, it'll be like, you know, you have whatever, some people, and then like some vampires show up, and then by the end of the film, or even by like halfway through, all the characters are just like, yeah, okay, vampires exist, and they've kind of just like accepted that. Whereas in this film, I feel like it kind of manages to almost maintain throughout pretty much its entire runtime this obvious sense of the disconnect between the idea of a demonic possession in this kind of Washington DC house of this, you know, like famous actress. She's like a famous actress, right? She's not. Yeah, that's right. Obviously, why'd I even question that? But yeah, like that's the thing. Like having that contrast between like the fact it's almost like they're still just trying to live their lives, and that's a really interesting thing. I don't know. Yeah, it's almost like there's just a line that a lot of movies cross where it's kind of like, okay, we're just accepting the fact that vampires or zombies or whatever exist, and now the characters are just dealing with that. Whereas in this film, it's almost like you never depart that much from just some people just trying to live their normal life and deal with this kind of methodological way.
Yeah, there's so much skepticism, even from the priests. Like, there's a lot of skepticism, and apparently there's some more in the book as well, which is maybe why, obviously I imagine the book's really good. But that's the thing, you said mundanity, that's the case. This is just a normal American girl, in a normal place in America, Georgetown. I do wish I'd visited the Exorcist steps when I went to Washington, D.C. I didn't manage to do that. Yeah, but
it depends how close they are to the center. If they're way out of the way, screw that.
No, I mean they're relatively close. It's not too far. The thing is, one of the keys is Chris. Another key is like the priests, how they react, and the way the movie is shot as well. It's just very flat, normal shots, nothing spectacular, and that really does ground the movie, and that is fantastic, and I love it. So yeah, just a great way to tackle this subject, and it could have been really bad, but it wasn't, and I think you can see by the reaction, people loved it. And of course, we're talking a lot about like the tone of the movie and how the characters react. But of course, like what maybe makes it more iconic is the actual, or what happens to Reagan when she is possessed, of course, which we'll get into. But firstly, Michael, what is this movie inspired by?
It's inspired by a true story, isn't it? That's like a thing.
Yes, it's inspired by a case in the late 40s. Priests of the Roman Catholic Church performed a series of exorcisms on an anonymous boy documented under the pseudonym Roland Doe or Robbie Mannheim. The 14-year-old was the alleged victim of a demonic possession. Supernatural claims surrounding the events were used in Blatty's 1971 novel The Exorcist. Roland was an only child and dependent upon adults in his household for playmates, primarily his aunt Harriet. His aunt, who was a spiritualist, introduced Roland to the Ouija board when he expressed interest in it. After Aunt Harriet's death, the family experienced strange noises, furniture moving of its own accord, and ordinary objects such as vases flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. The boy then underwent a number of exorcisms. You can look at Wikipedia, you can see the story is all bullshit, but at least it's fun. And that setup right there, that's classic horror movie stuff, really. Honestly, Blatty could have just taken. I said Blatty. Blatty could have just taken that story and put it in his book, and that would have been, fine. But he did adapt it. But yeah, what do you think of that story, Michael? Do you agree with me? It's like kind of a cool horror story in its own right.
Yeah, I do. And actually, there is a and I think this movie was pretty good. There's actually like this movie made that's basically about a former priest who goes around debunking exorcisms. And then, like, basically he shows up to an exit or like a demonic possession, and he like is trying to show that it's not real. But then like creepy things happen that makes him think it is real. And I feel like it was definitely a film that was very inspired by The Exorcist, considering it's literally about a priest like struggling with faith and all that kind of stuff. Am I also right in saying, we started watching it? Remember that movie like The Exorcism of Emily Rose? Isn't that also almost like a kind of movie? It's almost like a meta movie where it's like about an exorcism, and it kind of deals with the question of like, was the exorcism legitimate? So I feel like it's something which a lot of people have kind of explored, like that question of like, you got an exorcism, but what if the exorcism isn't even legit, basically?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But anyway, let's talk about the temperature, Michael, by the way. So this is the production section. So that's the inspiration. Now we get into the production.
Oh, yeah.
So the film's opening scenes were filmed in Iraq, of course, and it reached 54 degrees in the day.
Oh, wow.
Celsius, of course, which limited shooting to dawn and dusk. The exorcism scenes were challenging to film. Friedkin wanted the bedroom set to be cold enough to see the actor's breath, as in the novel. A refrigeration system was installed to cool the set to minus 20 Fahrenheit, which is minus 29 Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
Since the set lighting warmed the air, it remained cold enough to film for only 3 minutes at a time. Due to frequent issues, only 5 shots could be finished each day. The complete scene, filmed in script order, took a month to complete. Also, production took twice as long and cost almost 3 times what was planned. Shooting was delayed 6 weeks after a bird flew into a circuit breaker on the house sets, starting a fire that destroyed all of them except for Reagan's room.
Spooky.
Yeah. I know. Many cast and crew were injured. So Burstin, which is the mom, and Blair, the kid, have lasting consequences from back injuries. Burstins occurred when Reagan throws Chris. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
The take used in the film left her unable to film for 2 weeks and on crutches for the rest of the shoot with a fractured coccyx. The director actually told the stunt guy to really tug on her because she's connected to a wire, you can see. And he tells the stunt guy to really tug on her to make it dramatic. And then
why are directors always jerks? Iconic movies and jerk directors. Name a more classic duo.
Yeah, and basically, the stunt guy tugged really hard. She hit her back really hard and fractured her coccyx. So she had chronic problems due to inadequate early treatment, by the way. So Linda Blair fractured her spine after being loosely strapped to the rocking bed. Take also used in the film. So, when the bed's rocking and she's like moving up and down, again, she was loosely attached on a take and hurt her back really badly, and she developed scoliosis, as well as a lifelong aversion to cold from her time in the cold bedroom wearing only a nightgown and long underwear, which is kind of crazy because, like, she's under the covers. You don't need to, like, have her wearing, like, only that, but whatever. Friedkin, the director, really did not treat these actors well. But that was the 70s. That's what happened, back in the day. Yeah, it was the Wild West. So other people connected with the film or their family members died. McGowan died a week after completing his scene as Dennings. Malloris also died, like her character, before the film was finished. The night watchman, the operator of the refrigeration system for Reagan's room, and an assistant cameraman's newborn all died. Blair's grandfather died during the first week of production, and von Sydow had to return to Sweden after his first day shooting when his brother died, further delaying shooting. In 2015 as well, I like this, Hatra, the World Heritage Site where the prologue was shot, was damaged by ISIS militants. So
wow,
even
ISIS are in on it.
I know, they're part of this curse. So the many mishaps have led to a belief the film was cursed. So, Michael, does that sound like a cursed production to you?
I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things you got to think like maybe it's kind of likely. I mean, or like it's kind of thing where maybe it just happens by chance. At the end of the day, I mean, these were the 70s. Everyone was doing drugs. The actors especially. Maybe they're all just burning the candle at both ends. They're all bound to die. Maybe
it's a convenient excuse, Michael. Well, the newborn was burning the candle. The assistant cameraman's newborn was, what was that phrase you used?
Burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, that's it. That's what
he was on drugs.
Friedkin believed there might have been supernatural interference. Friedkin asked a priest to perform an exorcism on the set, and the priest instead blessed the cast and crew, believing an exorcism would make the cast more anxious. Film historian Sarah Crowther believes that the stories of the curse were disseminated by Warner's, likening it to horror producer William Castle's marketing gimmicks. She believed the curse was instead the result of Friedkin's driving relentless production. The director's like, oh yeah, what's happening with all these accidents on set, all this incompetence? Oh yeah, it's a curse, not just because of me. No, definitely not. Blatty agreed. If you shoot something for a year, people are going to get hurt, people are going to die. Yes, it did take a while, and yes, Friedkin doesn't, seem like the most normal guy. And the fact that it took so long, no curse here. Everything I think can be explained. So, Michael, I'm going to talk about the reaction to this movie now. Ooh. Of course, you don't know anything about this, do you?
Well, I mean, I would not be shocked if you were to now tell me that there was kind of a moral panic around this film. If you told me that, I would be less than shocked.
Well, there was a bit of a moral panic, but mainly people went to see this movie in droves. So, audience members, by the way, screamed and fled the theatre during the only sneak preview, which is just funny. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
People in the 70s are, we've evolved since then.
Yeah, although you say that, remember like those clips of people freaking out at Paranormal Activity, and that movie wasn't scary.
Yeah, but,
that was that was lies.
Yeah, nothing like this. When it was over, studio head John Cayley and the other executives were stunned. They believed the film was brilliant, but did not know how to market it, and decided on the limited early release after Christmas. Burstyn recalled watching viewers in Montreal, maybe she's Canadian, I don't know, landing up at 4 a.m. in frigid weather. In New York, patrons endured minus 14 degrees Celsius.
I like all this like comment about like the weather and stuff, and it's like the actors like, oh really, that's really something.
minus 14. Imagine minus 29.
Yeah.
Patrons endured minus 14 in cold rain and sleet. The film grossed $1.9 million in its first week, setting records for each theatre it was booked in. So that's I think the the crazy thing about this, they had a hit, and it was straight away, I think, because the book had really good reviews and people liked the book.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you make something. I guess it's that cynical thing, right? Though they went for an established property. I mean, when will the studio executives stop it?
I know, right? A woman. So we're going to talk about the illness or the sickness with this movie. So a woman in New York was said to have miscarried during a showing. One man was carried out on a stretcher after 20 minutes. Nausea was frequent. A Toronto reviewer recalled how the vomit in the bathroom blocked access to the sinks. "We have a plumber practically living here now," said the manager of Toronto's University Theatre.
Wow.
Which is crazy because you watch this movie nowadays and it's like, well, there's nothing that would make you throw up.
Yeah. Well, I will say the scene of like when they're doing like the drawing blood. I personally don't like blood.
We will get to that, Michael. Well, that's not a horror scene, of course.
No, yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Like, so I was like, oh, yes. But yeah.
We will get to that though. Several cities attempted to ban it outright or prevent children from attending. I think there was a police raid on a theatre in Mississippi as well, because it was showing the movie. Roger Ebert, who had favourably reviewed the film, found the special effects unusually graphic, making it stupefying that it was rated R. Later, head of the MPAA ratings board, Richard Hefner, said, "How could anything be worse than this? And it got an R? Well, plenty of things could be worse than this. You just have to wait a few decades." Yeah. It's this reaction which we're talking about, indeed from the UK as well, which we're going to get onto. Like, our country has its own section on Wikipedia, but
Yeah. Because this was banned, wasn't it? I completely forgot about that. But like,
yeah, this movie was called the scariest movie ever made, and as you can see, like, no horror movie elicited this reaction, which is why we're covering it, because it was so incredible. Like, just not the amount of people who went to see it, but the visceral reactions people had to it. But again, it's just very funny to look back at these quotes. What could be worse than this? Like every horror movie ever now.
Yeah.
Right. So the UK, Michael, after the passage of the Video Recordings Act of 1984. The Exorcist was submitted to the BBFC, there we go, for a home video certificate, so it had to now after the passing of this legislation. A majority voted to grant it, but director James Furman vetoed them. He believed, even with the proposed 18 certificates, the film's notoriety would lead underage viewers to seek it out. Oh no, oh god, imagine an underage viewer watching this. God, imagine, oh god, imagine all the horror.
Oh yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Therefore, all video copies of The Exorcist were withdrawn in the UK in 1988. Following a successful 1998 theatrical re-release, the film was submitted for home video release again in 1999. It was passed uncut within 18 certificates, and in 2001, Channel 4 showed The Exorcist on UK broadcast television for the first time. I mean,
oh, wow, and ever since 2001, and then what happened? 9/11.
That's insane, though. Like, during our lifetime, this movie was banned in the UK.
Yeah, because I remember hearing a thing about... See, I mean, I feel like certainly when I was growing up, I remember hearing people talk about it as if it was still banned, which I don't think I was looking into film media when I was 6, so I think those people must have kind of been out of date with their information, but still.
Yeah. No, it's crazy watching this, like, casually... in the year 2023, like online, and that movie's banned. Really, you weren't allowed to show that movie up until 25 years ago in this country. That's crazy. Anyway, so awards, Michael. So The Exorcist has done for horror films what 2001: A Space Odyssey did for science fiction, wrote Cine Fantastique, legitimizing it in the eyes of thousands who previously considered horror movies nothing more than a giggle.
Are you having a giggle, mate?
The cultural conversation around the film helped it become the first horror film to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, among other awards. Blatty won Best Adapted Screenplay, while The Sound Engineers took Best Sound. It was the highest grossing R-rated horror film, unadjusted for inflation, until... Which movie, Michael?
Horror film? Mm-hmm. Oh, crap. I don't know. I mean, I assume it'll be a long period of time, otherwise it wouldn't be that significant, but I'm just trying to think... Because, like, the obvious example would be, like, Halloween, but that came out not that much later, so...
Do you honestly think Halloween would have grossed 400?
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, 400. Oh, shit. Is it, like, a Saw, or, like, one of the Saws, or, like, Paranormal Activity?
Nope.
Fuck.
No,
what's the... Give me the decade.
Last decade.
Like, so, the 2010s? Oh, I see.
You know, I think it cashed in... The movie did really well at the box office. We talked about it because of 80s nostalgia.
Was it?
It was it.
Oh, really? Okay,
yes.
well, yeah.
Yes. So think about that. That came out in 2017, and that's barely a horror movie, honestly.
Yeah.
And still, that's the only movie so far to have beaten The Exorcist in terms of an R-rated horror movie at the box office. What an incredible, just an incredible success story. One of the greatest movies of all time in this genre. Indeed, Michael, let's power rank what we think are the greatest, and that's not just the best.
It's
overall,
also like, reputation and things like that.
Yeah, reputation, success. Like The Exorcist has to be number one, right?
I guess the only thing that counts against The Exorcist is obviously you could say, well, it's not that scary for being the classic horror movie, but then I guess at the time it was considered, so...
Okay, I have another movie I'm thinking of which could actually contend for the greatest horror movie of all time. Do you know what I'm thinking of? We've reviewed it, of course.
Is it Night of the Living Dead?
No, I was going to say The Shining.
The Shining? Oh, yeah. The Shining, that's also an interesting one, because again, The Shining also isn't that scary.
Yeah, but that's the key. Like, they're good movies that don't rely on, you getting...
spooky.
Yeah, exactly, yes. Obviously, you mentioned... Like, there are, from what I can tell, like 3 genres of horror movies. There's like supernatural, movies. There's like zombie movies, and there's slasher movies.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Monster movies could be under like fucking zombie movies. That's kind of a similar thing. But you of course have I think in supernatural movies, The Exorcist is number 1. Maybe you have like Poltergeist number 2.
Yeah, I think I mean, I will say personally that like I find supernatural movies like the scariest because obviously like zombie movies are generally not regarded as that scary because they're not really that threatening.
What's The Shining? I was thinking it's a slasher movie.
I think it's probably more of a supernatural.
Yeah, maybe. So put The Shining number 2. Of course, he becomes a slasher after a supernatural interference, I guess, which is what makes it very good. And then, of course, zombie movies, which is the best zombie movie of all time. Night of the Living Dead.
Some people would say Dawn of the Living Dead. I personally, I always have said I have a soft spot for Day of the Dead simply because I think it's like it's very zombie-y, and then it has like a lot of people getting ripped apart and things like that. But
what about 28 Days Later?
Yeah, see, I mean, I think 28 Days Later is probably... I think 28 Days Later is really good in terms of it's probably the scariest zombie movie because it's the only zombie movie that really makes them like come across as threatening, and admittedly it mainly manages to achieve that by like having them like move quickly. Well done, they finally cracked it.
Best slasher movie is probably Halloween, right? Unless you've got another one.
No, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right.
I'm gonna put top 5 like greatest horror movies. The Exorcist number 1. Number 2, I think, is The Shining. Number 3, I'll go for Halloween, I think. Number 4, I really should have thought about this a bit more. Like, let's go for Dawn of the Dead. And then number 5, I don't know, the Thing. Even though we haven't
that's really funny because I was just about to say, The Thing for me is up there. I mean, also, would we count Alien as a horror movie? Because you could say it's got that kind of ambience.
Yeah, it's kind of a horror movie. It's kind of,
Yeah, I mean, I would, I don't know if I'd necessarily exactly agree with your ranking, but not enough to be bothered substantiating.
No, be bothered. Give your own ranking.
Okay, fuck it. What I'm thinking is Exorcist, Day of the Dead. Nope. What I'm thinking is Exorcist, 28 Days Later, Dawn of the Dead, The Thing, Day of the Dead.
So no room for The Shining at all.
Yeah, I do like The Shining, but
I like The Shining more than The Exorcist, by the way. I can The Exorcist because of its impact and like the gross and the way it like revolutionized the genre. And like you said, for me it has to be number 1. But anyway, let's now get into the movie, Michael. So this is we're going to discuss the themes and obviously the horror elements as well. Which we haven't really discussed, and that I think is still the biggest draw for this movie, despite it being a good movie. So we start off in Iraq. We have some very good music in the intro, and I think it helps it start this horror movie off because we start in this alien place, and then we go back to normal America. I think that's good. Yeah. And of course, the movie starts off with a Muslim guy saying Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, which of course it has to be, otherwise we wouldn't know it was Muslim. That's all they say.
But we know from the War on Terror that scares Americans.
That's good. It's already pretty scary.
Post 9/11, that was the scariest thing in the movie.
Yes.
A Muslim saying Allahu Akbar. So great scenes of Max von Sydow just walking around, and I think it's shot very well because it's from his perspective. So we're really wondering what's going on. It creates a great sense of mystery, and then of course he sees the statue of this demon, which has a name beginning with P. Pazazu, I think.
I think it starts with B actually. I think it's I thought it was Bazazu.
No, it's definitely starts with a P.
Okay, yeah. Well, so in that case, you're right. It's Pazazu.
Yes, and
like the bird from Lion King.
Yes, and then 2 dogs fighting near it as well. Very creepy first scene, and I love that shot of him like facing off with this demon because you don't know really what's happening, but obviously it's unsettling. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like it's also one of those things where again it's kind of that almost uncanny valley thing of horror where it's like something that's very real and almost like mundane. Again, I've used that word again. Like used for something horrific. And like I remember hearing somebody say like that they still really appreciate vampire films just because like nowadays a vampire is like such a cool, kind of like quaint idea. You know, you think about like Bela Lugosi and Dracula, like I want to, and you're just like that's stupid. So like the idea of anybody pulling off it being scary is just automatically appealing. And I think it's kind of a similar thing. Like you could go to any most people don't go to Iraq just casually, but you can go to kind of any old ancient site where you live, and you will probably see some indication of here's the kind of crazy, creepy gods that these people used to believe in. I know, like in a lot of
not like our gods.
Oh yeah, no, I was gonna say in a lot of churches in the UK actually they have green men, which are like weirdly pagan. I don't know why they're in churches, but they're like kind of representations of pagan gods and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, for example, fucking like Stonehenge, they used to do like human sacrifices there. And it's kind of that idea of, if you just saw one of these kind of weird looking statues, it's like, oh yeah, that's what like old people used to, like back in the day used to believe in. And it's like that idea of taking something that you would just dig up in the sand and turning into this terrifying villain. Again, it kind of adds to that disconnect between this ancient evil and the modern world, which I think really works.
No, it's good
because it's almost like it almost works that the statue doesn't actually look that scary. When you see like the statue as he's staring at it, you're like, well, that just
well, there must be something up with it. But that's the thing; it's a realistic source for the evil. Like,
also, by the way, Pazuzu's a real god. I just decided to look into it.
So Chris, who is Reagan's mother, is concerned about her. It's a very normal relationship between the mom and the daughter. That there's a lot of preamble before The Exorcist, and that's to make everything seem as normal as possible. She has the medical tests first, does Reagan, and that is crucial because again, that's what you would do if you were just a normal mother who's concerned about your kid having these fits and swearing and being rude or whatever. So Friedkin found the medical science impinging upon the innocence of this little girl, and this is what we're going to talk about. And those scenes disturb the audience the most. So the medical scenes really did get to the audience the most. More than any of the film's possession scenes. And you agree with this?
Yeah, big mood. Definitely. Like, but again, I mean, that's I guess it's just one of those things. Really, it probably comes down to whether or not you like blood or not. Like, I guess if you're the kind of person who is okay with blood, I suppose you just be like, okay, well, that's just a thing that's happening. But I feel like, having said that, it's not really a unique thing to not like blood.
No, I was kind of fine with it, but I thought, this is a little weird. But, because it's not in a horror setting.
Yeah, that's kind of a funny thing, yeah.
I guess this must be a procedure that was used. But I can understand, like, a lot of the audience really did not like those medical scenes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. So, Chris, I don't think there's a thematic reason for that either. There's no, like, look at what medical science can do to scare people. Like, I don't think that's that's the case. It's just, that's how scary operations can be and were definitely in the 70s.
I kind of agree. Yeah, it's hard to like work it out as like what I guess the point in it would be if it was trying to have some kind of specific point.
Yeah, I the point is, hey, look, this mother, she's doing everything she can, and this is what a procedure would look like. So that's what we're going to show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Chris hosts a party, and Reagan then appears and urinates. After she puts Reagan to bed, the bed shakes violently. This happens about 40 minutes in. That's what I was thinking while I was watching this. It's like, wow, there is a lot of setup here with Karras' character, which we'll get to, and Reagan as well. But that's the thing, it's a great setup because it builds anticipation. Like, I was thinking watching this, movies nowadays would not take this long before actually getting into the meat of the movie, which is, of course, this girl becoming fully possessed and an exorcism being needed. But, 40 minutes in, and we're getting the first signs of, something's actually really wrong with this girl, which I think is great, honestly, because I have patience, but I don't think, again, you can tell this is a novel by the fact there was a lot had to come before it, But yeah, I don't think movies nowadays would have this patience. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because obviously, even when you get into the actual exorcism, you're like, wow, this is happening pretty damn late. And yeah, I do think that it works well in terms of building things up. And, I think obviously if somebody went into this really wanting, the exorcism, then they would be disappointed. And certainly what I was expecting going into this movie was for it to be much more about, I was expecting to be drawn out, but I was expecting it to kind of be like, the movie would be about the exorcism itself, and kind of, maybe they have like one session of the exorcism like 30 minutes in, and then maybe they do some kind of research while like the things are getting worse, and then maybe they have another session. Like, I was expecting to be like multiple exorcism sessions across the course of the film while her condition gets worse. Whereas, of course, in reality, it's almost a similar thing in that it's her trying to deal with the issues, but it just takes longer. But of course, like you're saying, it takes a while before the issues themselves even really ramp up. And yeah, I do think it creates more of a sense of anticipation, which of course works a lot in terms of horror.
Yeah, no, I mean that is great because the build up, I think, is something that a lot of movies don't use, which as a tactic, there's something interesting is coming, it's happening, let's build it up more and more. So Chris is a mother who isn't Catholic, and I think again that is great because like her, the audiences would not believe this. For her, like us, it becomes inevitable that her daughter is possessed by a demon, which sounds stupid.
Yeah.
But when you're watching it, it's not. You're like, oh yeah, this girl must be possessed, and you fully believe it. But again, like I said, if you are just taken out of the movie, you think, oh god, it's such a silly concept, like a girl being possessed by a demon, and somebody believing that, like a rational adult believing that, who's not religious. Same thing, really. No, but the thing, that's the thing. So it's crucial that this character is not Catholic in any way. That makes it so much more believable that what could happen, could happen to anyone, and therefore you, of course, relate to it more. And of course, a key reason why this works, why you believe a girl is possessed, and you're fully buying it while watching the movie, is because of the character of Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree. Like they needed it to take a long time to kind of build up, because that then sells you on the fact that it's almost like, I like the way you put it, of like it being inevitable, and that almost makes it more horrific, where it's like it's not like these characters are almost willfully kind of going headlong, is that the expression, into this kind of situation. There's nothing they could do to avoid it, is the impression you get.
That would be the same for any of us. It would take a while. It would take a while for us to build up this belief that, oh yeah, this girl is possessed, and that's why I think this movie takes so long before you actually get to the meet, which is Karis, of course, meeting Reagan for the first time. Then the movie really starts, and I think it's great that happens like an hour and 20 minutes into the movie, or an hour and 30, I can't even remember, instead of like just an hour. Like that is great. So anyway, we're going to talk about feminism now, Michael.
Oh, good.
So a single working mother and her daughter are rescued by a patriarchal authority.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, that's what happens in this movie, and it could be a reaction against feminism, so we'll talk about this now. Peter Biskin describes the film as a male nightmare of female puberty. Emergent female sexuality is equated with demonic possession. For the male authority figures in The Exorcist, Reagan must be restored to her innocence through abusive and violent means. So do you agree with that?
No, I don't know. I mean, that's an interpretation, and are you saying, so that's the interpretation of just some random guy, right?
Yeah, so he was a former film producer.
Okay. So yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily something that I would say is my interpretation.
So this movie is not making that point, because also University of Toronto professor Trimble writes, it tapped into white American fears of nightmare futures that could result from the women's liberation, gay liberation, black power movements, challenges to the 1970s social order.
Yeah,
as a film about a revolting girl revolting against the little girl box in which she was stuck, and an army of men trying to put her back.
The one thing I find really strange about that's like kind of makes me think, I don't really know if I buy it, is the fact that the mum herself is an actress, which is kind of a very liberal profession.
Yeah, but she does make a comment, doesn't she, about Ho Chi Minh Disney thing?
Oh yeah, she does, doesn't she? Yeah. So maybe that's maybe she's not so based. But I would have just thought if you were trying to have, somebody, I don't know, you would have had them be some kind of more like. And also, I suppose the other thing is, and I guess maybe this makes sense, but I was going to say the fact that she's not a like the fact she isn't married. Like you'd almost think if it's supposed to be about, fear about rebellion against it, but I suppose you could say, well, it's the consequence of the fact that she's not married, and that's
Yes.
why.
I mean,
So yeah, I think it's probably a viable interpretation.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think the filmmakers wanted to make this into something about the challenging the 70s social order or feminism. They didn't want to make it pro or anti-feminist. And of course, what we're saying is the movie is these interpretations are framing it in a feminist way. And judging by what happens at the end of the movie, okay, Reagan's back, so the filmmakers would be saying, well, that's good, right? So the filmmakers are against women's liberation, but then of course, Chris isn't married; she's still a single mother. So I don't think the filmmakers considered this feminist angle because I think there's too many contradictions there. I don't think this movie is trying to say anything about feminism. I am interested to know why, of course, in the original novel, she is a single mother. I guess because it's easier. If there's just one parent.
Yeah, I mean, it puts a woman, well, especially a woman, in a more kind of vulnerable situation. And I know, I think, for example, remember the movie The Babadook?
Yeah.
Yeah, that also had a single mother in it. It's a thing.
The Babadook, Mimi.
Yes,
Mimi,
exactly.
The Babadook. Shut up.
The Babadook.
I'm trying to masturbate. No, Mimi. It's the Babadook. That's what she
does.
does.
Yeah, she does. You're right. She is trying to masturbate. You're not.
That's just what I remember from the movie.
Shut up! I'm trying to masturbate, you dickhead.
I'm trying to masturbate. No, Mummy, it's the Babadook. He's coming to get... Right, whatever. The point is that, yes, I think, it does make her more vulnerable. And also, of course, I think another parent would have just made things more complicated. Then you'd have the dynamic between the mother and the father, which is not really necessary.
Yeah.
So, of course, living with a single father is a lot more weird than a single mother. And how can she afford to live as a single mother?
She's an actress.
She's an actress, which is a high-paying job and one of the few that women could get in the 70s. So there you go. I think maybe that's the solution to the question.
That's all there is to it.
Father Damien Karras, a psychiatrist, visits his ailing mother in New York. He confides to a colleague that he feels unfit in his role, citing a crisis of faith. His mother dies and he feels guilty. Of course, a lot of backstory given to a guy who is not the main character. And you can, again, tell this was a novel first, I think, by these Karras scenes especially. But that's great. That's great. You get so much backstory to this guy. And I feel like a modern movie, imagine The Exorcist didn't exist. Someone came and presented Warner Brothers with this idea. They would not want this much time devoted to the priest and his backstory. They would, it's just, I can't see it.
Yeah.
You agree there, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is... And I mean, never mind that. Also, you have 10 minutes at the beginning that's entirely dedicated to this guy who just shows up right at the end.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
yeah. Well, that's what I said before. Yeah, I did actually say this. I did think that the fact that the movie has a prologue in Iraq shows a lot of effort was taken. Again, just so much effort.
Are you aware? I think that is a so there are multiple cuts of this film, and I think in the original theatrical cut it doesn't start off in Iraq. That was the thing that was added later.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah, the ending is of course different in the director's cut too.
Okay.
So Friedkin, by the way, considered Jack Nicholson. And Paul Newman was interested too. Jack Nicholson would have been very interesting, I think. He would have been in two iconic, my top two greatest horror movies, I guess, The Exorcist and The Shining, if that was the case. Jason Miller had received a Catholic education, this is the actor who played Karras, and studied to be a Jesuit priest until experiencing a spiritual crisis similar to Karras'.
Oh, so he wasn't even really acting then, was he?
Upon reading the novel, he told Friedkin, "Karras is me." Friedkin realized Miller's dark good looks, haunted eyes, quiet intensity, and low compassionate voice were exactly what the part needed, and I agree. It's funny, he said he's told he looks like a boxer, and I was thinking he looks a bit like Sylvester Stallone, who played a boxer just 3 years later in Rocky, of course, which is funny because hey, that movie didn't exist yet, so yeah, no, I guess that shows that Sylvester Stallone was a perfect choice to play Rocky.
This movie walked so Rocky could run.
Yeah. Great casting. Reagan's personality now, Michael, becomes violent. So she is subjected to medical tests which find no physical cause. During a house call, Reagan exhibits abnormal strength. And that was a good scene. I don't think it was scary, but just the contrast given what came before was amazing. Again, this is the thing, right? This is normal America, okay?
Yeah.
Right. There are scientific tests being carried out on this girl. Her mother is not some religious weirdo. And like I said, it grounds the movie, but it also makes what is happening to Reagan seem that much stranger. you have these boring flat scenes in doctors' offices, like
Yeah.
the most boring place in the world, like these offices, and then there's the contrast then to Reagan slapping this doctor and saying like fuck me,
Yeah.
like that. And the normal world this takes place in makes the possession seem believable, but also the impact of what Reagan does when she is possessed, it makes it even more shocking.
Yeah, like that's the fact that it's quite mild stuff in the grand scheme of things, like,
Yeah.
it's somebody swearing, like that's not.
It's not that crazy, but
Yeah.
because the world it's set in, it feels crazy. And the fact that it's not going over the top at this stage, she's just slapping him and like swearing.
Yeah.
That's that's the thing. It really
And like obviously at
works
that
so
point
well.
you would believe it was just like a psychological thing.
Yeah, well, the slap was very powerful though.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so that's the thing. I think the fact that this movie is so again mundane, it works for making everything that's happening to Reagan more believable. But then what she does when she is possessed, again, the fact that the head spins around, of course, which we'll get to, like it makes that it makes that impact even greater as well because of what has come before it. It's just a normal world, so that happening, it kind of shocks you a bit. So Friedkin was considering older actresses. We're going to talk about Linda Blair until she showed up, by the way, unannounced. She showed up unannounced and was like, yeah, I'm ready to audition. Friedkin later recalled her as smart but not precocious, cute but not beautiful, a normal, happy 12-year-old girl, which is, I don't know, feels a bit harsh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not beautiful, that's why you're perfect for this role.
It's not what you want to hear, but I guess it's worth it if you get to be a famous actress.
She also had read the book and knew what masturbation was, and apparently had done it. I read that quote as well.
Well, of course. I mean, that's what you want to ask in an interview. Like, before I give you the role, honey, let me ask a question. The 70s.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, that's all good. It's I don't know what to. When I was reading that, I'm like, okay, it's kind of interesting. Obviously she wasn't freaked out by like masturbating with a cross, but I don't think she did that scene. I think that was a stand-in who did that.
Yes, I would hope so. Yeah, I guess like it's. I mean, I suppose like the logic would be some people are like, oh, the fact that this innocent girl had to perform this stuff is very bad. And I guess the logic is, well, she was aware of it and she knew what was going on.
Yeah, she didn't perform that stuff.
No, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and she at the end when Karis is hitting her, she wasn't. Linda Blair wasn't playing Reagan then either. I think so. It was someone else who didn't receive credit until years later.
Oh, good.
Yes. Anyway, after all these difficult scenes, Linda Blair apparently she'd tiptoe around and giggle after every bit. Blatty recalled. Friedkin said there wasn't one other actress I would have considered, and I think that's true. Like she really plays this role well. I think she does a great job.
Yeah.
And this would be a tough role for a 12-year-old to play, but she, I think, does it very well. So credit to her.
No, yeah, actually, yeah. Like, and she went on to become quite a significant actress after this, I think. Obviously, one of the problems with horror films, they tend to have like children in them, I guess, because it, I don't know. I was going to say increases the stakes. Of course, the funny thing is it doesn't, because the children aren't going to die. Unless it's a really edgy film.
It exposes
the weakness of the emotional vulnerability of the parents, I guess.
Well, I was going to say, children, of course, are a symbol of innocence.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If something's, hurting that innocence, then that's extra impactful.
Yeah, but yeah, basically, I mean, obviously, the usually the problem is that you then get quite bad child actors, but she's a very good child actor, so well done her.
If she did not really get into it when she's doing those scenes, like pretending to be a demon, then this would be a lot worse.
Yeah.
So anyway, one night Chris finds the house empty except for a sleeping Reagan. Then she crawls down the stairs, of course, Reagan doing the spider thing. And the key to these scenes, I think, is that scene, for instance, the spider thing comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's
all
like
of a
crazy.
sudden she's doing something weird. There is no slow build-up. I don't think it's that scary. It's just cool, though.
I would say I think it's creepy, but that's me. I mean, personally...
Yeah, but it's cool as well to see something that creepy,
Yeah. Like I think that like the demon stuff is actually something I find genuinely scary. Like there's a
really?
Yeah, there's a not good movie called The Unborn. And it is not good. But there's a scene where a guy, like this old guy, is like at the foot of some stairs, like a woman's like walking around a house at night, in an old people's home, and she walks around and there's this old guy and he's just at the foot of the stairs and he just turns his head upside down, and it's just like, and like it's one of those, I guess it's like a brain, it's one of those images where you just like, if you're walking around at night, you just imagine seeing that. And I don't know, to me, like, that's, like, creepy in a way where it's just, like, it just plays on your mind. Whereas, and, you compare that to, like, a slasher thing or something like that. Like, if, I don't know, like, for some reason, I feel like it's also because it's subtle, and that's what makes it scary in a way. And I suppose that's a bit of a weird thing to say about her walking upside down the stairs. But it's, like, a slasher film can only really be scary if the guy's, like, running at you with a knife, which is a pretty obvious kind of simple and easy to interpret scare. But, like, the funny thing about, like, somebody walking upside down, like, in the way, I think it's called spider walking. I think you already used that term.
Yeah.
Is that, like, in some sense, there's no logical reason why it should be scary. But, like, the fact that it's just so bizarre is what makes it scary, but in a strange way. And that almost makes it, like, I guess it's, like, it's hard to process. Because, like, if someone's, if you watch a, Scream and there's a guy running around with a knife, you're like, okay, I get why that's scary. Pretty obvious. But, like, this, you're like, that's scary. But it's, like, scary just because it's, like, what the hell is that? Like, I think it appeals to that fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is the case. It's just what the fuck is this? Yeah. And it comes out of nowhere as well, which is crucial as well.
Absolutely.
There's no like build up, and you hear her. It's just like what the hell is that? So yeah, very good stuff. Also, when she grabs the psychiatrist's dick, that's funny as well. That's the thing. I don't find all the demon stuff like scary. I don't think this movie again is scary, but that's fine. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I still think it's a really good movie, and again, it's more. I just have an appreciation for it. Like, oh, that's really cool when that happens. And of course, more on the spider thing. Friedkin cut the spider scene over Blatty's objection just prior to the premiere, believing it came too early. Whether the scene had been shot at all was debated by fans for years. Friedkin denied having done so until Commode found the footage in Warner's archives in the mid-90s while researching his book on the film. So he also did a fucking book on it. Wow.
Oh, wow.
It was restored. It was restored in the 2000s director's cut. I do wonder, like, did maybe Commode did a book instead of a documentary? But I swear I read he did.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did like a book and a documentary as like a companion to each other.
Yeah, I hope it's both. Otherwise, I was marking you before for not knowing he did a documentary, and he never even did one. It's just a book.
No, I think you're right.
A man is found dead beneath Reagan's window. A detective questions Karras, confiding that the victim's head was turned backwards. This, of course, is Burke, the director, who was calling that guy a Nazi before, which was very funny.
Yes,
I love that. And I find it odd that a police detective would mention witchcraft to Karras, the priest, as if that is something he would believe, or maybe he was just screwing with him, trying to get his name or a name out of him.
Yeah, it could have been like he was trying to, I don't know, like imply like, hey, you're a man of the cloth. If this is a witchcraft thing, shouldn't you be concerned about it? Like basically trying to get him to help.
Yeah, break his principles, Yeah, exactly. So we're on to the crucifix scene now, Michael, where Reagan missed the bites with the crucifix. So Reagan's condition worsens as her body becomes covered with sores. Reagan has another violent fit, stabbing her vagina with the crucifix and turning her head backwards. So yeah, it's not really masturbating,
Yeah.
Yeah, but whatever. That scene where she turns her head, by the way, stunned audiences. Although I have to say, when the devil inside her or the demon inside her says, "Look at your cunting daughter" or something.
Doesn't he say it like an English accent, or is that?
I wrote that down. I said it's funny. I'm sorry, it's funny when he says that because it's a British accent. Like, why is this demon British? Like, what is going on here?
So, the villains are always English. That's how it works.
Yeah, I know. It's just funny to say like cunting daughter. Like, I don't know.
You cunt.
Yeah, look at your cunting daughter. That was funny. I think that his accent, is a lot better later on, or the demon's accent, because it gets deeper.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it was like working on it, like over time.
Yeah, I know. Like I think it'd be probably better if the demon talked less, because that would make it a bit scarier.
Yeah, I was gonna say like once it, I guess like this film does actually kind of fall into that thing, and it's like a classic thing in horror films of like once it's kind of been revealed, it becomes less scary.
Yeah,
it's like I think my favorite example of that is The Descent, which is good because we've reviewed that, where it's like the beginning of it, where you're like, oh my god, what's that thing in the cave? That's terrifying. Is really something, and then like you're like, oh, it's just like some like generic kind of monster thing.
So Friedkin said the scene's power over audiences came from its unusual combination of sex and religion. To many viewers, it lasted much longer than 50 seconds. He had filmed much more, but ultimately decided that it was about how much I could take. The scene's power, Commode writes. So this is, obviously when that scene where the head is turned and everything. The scene's power, Commode writes, comes from Friedkin's head-on approach, centering it on a brightly lit screen, punctuating the thrusts with a stabbing sound. Blatty pleaded with Friedkin to stop destroying the film. Friedkin said that the scene would be one of the film's biggest draws. when it turned out that it was, Blatty found it terribly depressing.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck, you make a movie called The Exorcist, and this kid is
you
doing
know what's happening.
weird fucking shit, like, oh, she's stabbing her vagina with a crucifix. Like, yeah, that's something a demon would do, you know?
I will say that is very, like, it's very wincy. Like, you know, I mean, obviously, like, any kind of violent assault of someone's genitals. So, in a way, it's good they didn't go for it too much. They didn't go, like, full, you know, like, hostile or something like that.
Yeah, no, I don't think you could again.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. But yeah, like the film's other special effects, but the head turning was performed with a life-sized animation dummy of Regan. And yeah, apparently the sound when her neck turns is a wallet as well. But yeah, so there you go. That's how that sound was made, and yeah, it's just a great scene, very creepy scene. I think that's the scene in terms of the possession scenes that the audiences reacted to strongly.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, I think when people think about, and it's kind of interesting actually because. You know, I just mentioned the unborn. When people like think about demonic possession, I feel like that idea of people contorting their kind of limbs and basically their body moving in all sorts of ways it shouldn't is like very associated with that idea of demonic possession. And I kind of assume that probably came entirely from this movie. Like, I don't think there was any precedent for like, oh, if you've got a demon, like, you know, it doesn't mention in the Bible, like, and then the guy's head turned around. So like, it seems like this movie like kind of made that up, but it's like now everyone's like, oh yeah, if you got a demon, your head's going to spin around.
Yeah, great fucking idea. Great fucking idea, for sure. So anyway, Chris seeks out Karis, who visits Regan. The possessed Regan claims to be the devil himself, and projectile vomits into Karis's face while speaking in tongues. Yeah, the vomiting is famous. Of course, it was just pea soup. But that's what I think was parodied a lot. Of course, this movie was parodied. And that, in particular, I think was what people really like, you know, or just vomiting at some... like, because it does come out of nowhere. But the thing is, I was prepared for it because I've seen so many iterations of that.
That's it, yeah.
Yes, but at the time, that must have been quite shocking. So, Blatty also made the screenplay unambiguous about Regan's condition. In his novel, every symptom and behaviour she exhibits that might indicate possession is counterbalanced with a reference to an actual case where the same phenomena were found to have a natural scientific cause. Aside from Karis's initial professional skepticism, that perspective is absent from the film.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I actually wrote at one point, I said, you know, I feel like this movie certainly would have been different. I think arguably, you know, possibly better if it did maintain that ambiguity. And that's something I wrote down. I was like, you know, I said, you know, it could have been better if they left more ambiguity. And it's one of those things where, you know, obviously, you know, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth here. I still think it's a very good movie. But yeah, it's interesting that the book maintained that ambiguity, because obviously that ambiguity does add something to the movie in terms of interest. And the fact that eventually that's entirely gone, you know, like, well, this is clearly a demonic possession, just takes away a bit of what could be a potential source of intrigue. But I guess the flip side is you could then say, well, it adds more stuff in terms of, you know, there's things they just couldn't have in the movie if they did try to maintain that ambiguity.
Yeah, I am actually fine with the lack of ambiguity, because I think it's...
Because you're a simp for this movie.
Well, the thing is, you see Regan in real life and not in a book, and you see what she looks like.
Yeah, I guess that's it. In a book, you can have ambiguity.
Yeah, you see how she acts. I feel like Karis, for instance, is skeptical enough. Like, the way she looks, the voice references to Karis's mother, who we know is dead, all of that happens, then you know what, fine. I buy this guy, Karis, as a reasonable man. Therefore, given what I have seen, of course, as well, I am fine with him doing an exorcism. Like, and that's the thing, that's the great thing, like, in terms of how mundane this movie is, how undramatic it tries to be in certain instances to increase the believability. Like, Karis is going through the church bureaucracy as well.
Yeah.
Like, he has to ask for an exorcism. He doesn't do it just because he feels like he really has to. No, he goes through the Catholic Church bureaucracy, you know, and he asks, and he still in that meeting says, I don't know, but I just, you know, think this might help. Anyway, so Lancaster Merrin is summoned. This is Max von Sydow. When he arrives at the house, we see the shot, which is on the poster, of course.
Oh yes, yeah, with like the mist. Yeah, and again, I was also shocked. Like, when at this point, we're getting to the moment where I'm like, holy crap! There's a lot of stuff that's like barely happens until the end of the movie.
Yeah, there is so much build-up and anticipation for the actual exorcism. That's what I was thinking before they go in. Like, that's what's so great about this movie, about this story. It's like, yeah, oh god, I can't wait for this exorcism to happen. And it's like 1 hour, 45 minutes in. We haven't got there, but that's wonderful. And of course, once the exorcism begins, Regan rises from the bed and they shout, you know, the power of Christ compels you, which is a famous line. The thing is, I think the exorcism. Look, I don't know what an exorcism is meant to be, but of course you can make it more dramatic. Like, she just rises from the bed, but apart from that, there's nothing crazy that happens. And considering, she turned her head before, she vomited before, she doesn't really do anything. You kind of, I don't know, I felt kind of let down that, like, nothing crazy actually happened in the exorcism scene.
Yeah, that is a good point, and I do think that, again, I mean, that's kind of what I was saying about, like, it could have been interesting if the exorcism itself was a bit more kind of centered and maybe even drawn out, where it's like, maybe they try and then it like fails, but it's kind of like, okay, and I guess, you could say it a little bit undermines the threat of this demon, that ultimately as soon as they start doing that, the demon kind of puts up a bit of a fight, but not that much of one.
Well, to be fair, the demon does kill the Max von Sydow. Yeah, he does. And that's the thing, I'm just pretty unsure who's winning this battle. Like, that's the thing, you can guess, I know you can guess, like, but I'm unsure after like the first go of it. I'm like, oh, who's doing better here? Are the priests doing well? I'm really not sure. And that's kind of frustrating as well. But then, of course, Karis then goes back into the bedroom. But we're now going to get onto the religious element of this movie, Michael. Because, of course, this movie talks a lot about like Catholicism.
Does it?
Yeah, specifically, the exorcism is mentioned as a tool of Catholics. And it's not just like a Christian thing. It's, the movie's sense of Catholicism. And to some Catholic viewers, such as those who had lapsed in their faith, but also some priests, they experienced spiritual crisis. Parishes reported calls inquiring about having an exorcism performed. Catholic publications gave it generally negative reviews for suggesting exorcisms were common and possibly encouraging the belief in the occult and Satanism. Okay, I think Karis makes it pretty clear it's not common, because he said, well, when was the last time an exorcism was performed? Like the 16th century, and like we have rational explanations for these things now, like schizophrenia, for instance. And he says no one's an expert because no one's done one. So that's the thing, like, I don't, that right there I took it from Wikipedia, and I don't think that's a good criticism at all. Yeah. Also, it encourages beliefs in the occult and Satanism. Well, your whole fucking religion, Christianity, encourages the belief in fucking Satan. So, don't have the devil in your Bible if you don't want people believing in, the devil and converting to Satanism. I'm sorry. That's BS. So individual priests familiar with the theology were also critical. One said that while he believed in the devil, there is no shred of evidence from the Bible that he can possess an individual. A later historian has found that the church was not as critical of the film as reports suggested, privately considering it faith-affirming. And that's the thing, that's my reaction from this. I read, in that paragraph a bunch of stuff about the church not being happy. Indeed, they weren't happy about the release date either, one day after Christmas. But the thing is, if I was Catholic, I'd be like, oh yeah, so this horror movie treats my religion with respect.
Yeah, like that's the thing, like this movie like shows that they're like, Catholicism works. If anything,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
an endorsement.
yeah, like Catholics are the only ones who perform exorcisms, and it's like, oh, it's a dirty, embarrassing secret that they keep in their closet, apparently. But like, it worked, So
yeah, if like if they're embarrassing secrets, great. Imagine, wow, I can't wait to see what other secrets these guys have.
Yeah, I know. God, I can't wait to get peer behind the Catholic Church,
yeah,
see what's going on there. But so that's the thing. It should be an affirmation of what they believe in. Like, Karis is a reasonable man. That is the case. He's also a psychiatrist, and even he, as a representative of the Catholic Church, doesn't believe it at first, but then eventually believes it and has his faith kind of reaffirmed.
Yeah.
And so if you're a Catholic, you should be watching this thinking, the movie doesn't treat Catholicism with disrespect. It's a serious movie. Like we said, it's quite boring and mundane. It doesn't like turn Catholicism into something ridiculous at all, which it could have done even with the same kind of plots, but it doesn't do that. So yeah, I think that if you're a Catholic, you have to watch this and be like, well, you can maybe not like horror movies or think, oh, it's ridiculous that the devil can possess someone, like one priest said. But overall, like this movie should be like a win for Catholics. And indeed, I think I read like people went to Catholic church a lot more after this movie.
Yeah, and they were all asking about the exorcism. Like, oh,
yeah, exactly. That is true. Yes.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I do think it's a shame, because I would like to see one of those kind of like charismatic Protestant churches doing exorcism with like just like some black guy in a suit. Like, just with like everyone doing all the clapping and stuff, because that's the undeniably, I feel like Catholic exorcisms have all this sort of they're like very like stuffy, And I like
Yeah.
the idea that instead you know have some people who are just really getting into it, like the demon is just there like spinning its head around. They're just like, oh Lord Jesus, yeah, get the devil out, like that. I think that would be an improvement.
Karis, of course, now assures Chris that Reagan will not die and re-enters the room and finds Merrin dead. Enraged, Karis beats the possessed Reagan and demands that the demon take him instead.
It would be quite funny if he killed Reagan by beating her.
Hilarious. So
Great.
the demon rips the medallion of St. Joseph from Karis' neck and possesses him, freeing Reagan. Karis hurls himself out the window, tumbling down the stairs. So he realized he had to sacrifice himself to save the girl, right?
Just like Jesus.
Yeah, because just like Jesus. People said that, oh, like the demon kills him at the end and evil wins, but like I think that's the case. He's like take me instead, you know, and then he's possessed by the demon. Then he is hurled out the window by the demon, and I don't know. Does that mean the demon is died? You know?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. You know, I only know supernatural law, and in supernatural law, that only happens if you get shot by one of the original rifles made by Samuel Colt. So I couldn't really say, but I think that within the logic of this film, the demon is, I guess, that you would think like it would be a situation where it kind of just goes back to like the netherworld where it like came from. You would think it would be a bit harder to kill a demon than that. I mean, it would be pretty embarrassing for the demon if it's been around for like thousands of years and it just dies because someone jumps out a window.
Yeah, no, I get that. But the point is the demon is gone from this world.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So he does defeat the demon through his actions, which is, again, pretty... I think it's a perfectly, like, kind of heroic move from him.
Yes, and in the director's cut, the ending, we have the detective and the priest, who, of course, gives him his last rites. Both of them go off to watch a movie together. So it's like
about how the movies can keep people together. It's a powerful story.
Yeah, but friendship lives on, love lives on, I guess, is the message. You know, evil does not win.
Yeah. It's another example of the film returning back to its familiar kind of mundanity, where it's just like they just continue on.
Yes. So themes now, Michael. So Stephen King called The Exorcist a social horror film if there ever was one. He sees the Reagan possession symbolizing. For middle-aged viewers, the outspoken youth protesting Vietnam, not protecting it. They'd love to do that. They can only protest Vietnam.
Yeah.
The Exorcist communicates an image of a U.S. in an unstable state of change that can no longer avoid its real and historical systemic evils, writes Amy Chambers.
I don't know. It's one of those things you can like always do. Every single horror film, you can say, "Oh, this is about like anxiety around change." You know, like Night of the Living Dead was about nuclear war. And racism, probably. Dawn of the Dead was about capitalism. And it's like, in some sense, yes. But I feel like the problem with horror films is like everyone's like pointed out that most horror films exist to deal with some kind of social anxiety to the point where nowadays you're kind of just like, well yeah, look, but I guess what I'd say is I don't think the film does anything exceptional as far as tackling that as a theme.
Middle-aged Americans were very upset about the youth.
Yes.
And so, like, the contrast is these, priests and the mother, they're very upset about Reagan being possessed by the devil and they want her to go back to her nice, innocent, happy self. But, the
problem with that is that the devil's the villain. So we're saying the youth are the villains?
Exactly. That's what I think he's saying, which, again, it implies that the filmmakers or Blatty were very, like, conservative, which I'm not sure is the case at all. So, again, I don't really agree with Stephen King. You can interpret that if you want.
Stephen King knows nothing about horror.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't. He actually doesn't because he wasn't happy with the cut of The Shining. Remember?
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
And he remade his own Shining, which was a lot worse. So, actual horror movies, he knows fuck all. Anyway, the politics also, Michael, at the time were interesting because of Watergate. Tom Brian said the spectacle of The Exorcist might have mirrored Watergate. I don't know. Right? Everyone was comparing everything to Watergate back then. So Brian reads the film as reactionary itself. This is what I was saying. So it's built on reverence of tradition despite its surface transgressiveness. It almost sneers at the politics of the 60s, he writes, noting Chris dismissing her film's take on the student protest as the Walt Disney version of the Ho Chi Minh story. And so that is a clue, but also in general, like you think about it, it's like the politics of the 60s aside that line, if we're making that interpretation. Okay, so therefore the politics of the 60s, these students, they're the devil, and these patriarchal authority figures trying to control Reagan, well, they're surely in the right because she's possessed by the devil. So that's the thing. If we agree with this interpretation, we're saying that the movie is quite conservative and reactionary, and not at all like transgressive, which I guess some critics implied.
Well, didn't you know that conservatism's the new punk?
Exactly, it's the new punk. So yeah, I'm not sure I agree with these interpretations at all, to be honest. Again, like I think because of all the social upheaval going on and the fact that it is a young girl who's possessed, and you have these traditional authority figures trying to help her. You can make these implications, but I'm not sure if those implications are correct. You'd have to have something from one of the filmmakers specifically saying this for me to buy it. Until that happens, I'm not buying it. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, sorry, yeah, I agree.
Okay, Michael, you conclude first.
Yeah, so this movie is, it is good. And I think, there's one thing actually I didn't mean to say, which is, one of the things I don't like is I really like the soundtrack of the do. It's only in the movie for like 5 seconds.
It's Tubular Bells.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. So, I like the soundtrack, and I was annoyed it wasn't in there very much. But yeah, for me, the main strengths of this film are, like I say, the fact the film is so strange, and the fact the film is obviously like a character study, and almost like an interpersonal drama that just has this kind of supernatural element at the core of it, that the movie itself and the kind of narrative is almost not willing to jump straight into. It's like this movie is not desperate to be a horror movie, and that means when the undeniably horrific stuff happens, it ends up being much more kind of deeply unsettling. And that's, I think, the main strength of this film. If I was to summarize it, I think I'd probably summarize it as that, and that is definitely a strength worth giving credit. I think I'm only going to give the film. I'm only going to give the film I'll give it a high 8.
Okay, that's higher than me.
I was going to give it a middling 8. Maybe.
Wow.
So I mean, okay, yeah. So maybe Luke, your surprise has decided. Maybe decided I'm going to give it a middling 8 because I was thinking a middling 8 anyway.
Well, that's the thing. I normally do ratings higher than you. I think for these. Yeah. So I'm giving it an 8 as well for the same reasons you said. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, good stuff.
Okay, what are we reviewing next week, Mike?
Well, next week we are reviewing the one, the only, arguably, I'm not sure, like, I haven't really seen this film, I don't really know much about it, but I assume, obviously we must be following up with, the access to another classic, well-regarded horror film. We're going to be reviewing the film Leprechaun.
Yes, Leprechaun, yes. So join us for that. As Spooktober continues, one of our 3 Spooktober movies, we're a third of the way through. Can't wait for Leprechaun next time. So hopefully you'll continue to have a spooky, scary October. And join us in a couple of weeks for another spooky movie. Who have you been, Michael?
I've been Michael.
I'm Luke. Thanks for listening to our review of maybe the most iconic horror movie of all time, The Exorcist. And bye.
Bye.